Only monsters play God. Hi there, I'm Alfa and this is ThirdFloorTwoKobo's Why You Should Watch. Today's film, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, now streaming on Netflix. There's something a little off about this film. Not bad, not inept, not in any way, shape or form subpar, just off. As though its pieces don't quite fit or mesh together. They don't quite sing. Beautiful pieces, extraordinary in their own right, but when put together, that alchemy is somewhat missing. In that sense, perhaps it mirrors the creature itself, a masterpiece in pieces. This adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein has been brewing for years. Guillermo del Toro has been obsessed with Frankenstein for pretty much his whole life. I think he said Frankenstein and Pinocchio are two of his favorite stories. Yeah, so it's a personal project that has been in the works in one shape or form in his mind for perhaps as long as he's lived. So Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, is a cautionary tale. It's not necessarily a monster story. It's more of a meditation on what happens when individuals play God, when people try to do things that are perhaps not supposed to be done, when they venture into fields wherein mere mortals are not meant to venture. It's a tale about obsession, about grief, about the cost of creation. And Guillermo honors that spirit, but he also pushes it into new territory. The film opens with very similar framing structures found in the novel. There's a captain at the edge of the known world, so to speak, in an Arctic wasteland, trying to forge ahead. He longs to conquer nature, to defy our limits, to push. And that's where we meet, or he meets, we meet through him, Victor Frankenstein, a man who has already gone down a similar path. The film essentially asks what happens when creators do anything except accept responsibility for what they've wrought through or as a consequence of their creative exercise. Guillermo del Toro does what he does best. He humanizes monsters and reveals the monstrosity in men. Oscar Isaac plays Victor Frankenstein with a disturbing conviction. Jacob Elordi of, what's the name of that show again?
A few moments later.
The one with all the gratuitous nudity. Sydney.
Yes, fuck it, I am in love with Nate Jacobs and he is in love with me, and you know you fucking give me that look, Maddie, because I didn't fuck your boyfriend. You two were broken up for 3 weeks and 3 days before we even had sex, so I didn't betray you. Plus you guys are terrible for each other and you know I'm right, and you guys can all judge me if you want, but I do not care. I have never, ever been happier.
Sweeney was in it as well. Euphoria. Yeah, Kendrick Lamar used Euphoria as a triple entendre. Jacob Elordi of Euphoria fame plays the creature, Victor Frankenstein's creature. He plays it with vulnerability and a grace and an elegance that really, really humanizes the character. Mia Goth brings an unconventional energy to Elizabeth. Right, so technically speaking, the film is excellent. This is, from a technical standpoint, one of the most beautiful things you will probably ever see it on as big a screen as you're able to. I haven't had the pleasure of seeing it on the big screen. That's like in cinema, but I mean, I think like an 82 inch is pretty decent. It wouldn't suffice to perhaps show how intricate a lot of the choices in terms of like production design choices, costume, cinematography. I watched the EPK that's attached to the film on Netflix, and apparently the HODs that Guillermo del Toro works with on this film are people that he's either worked with before or has a very, very strong relationship with. Production design is breathtaking. The costumes reinforce that gothic romanticism and allow you to be lost in the world. The score haunts the film like a second consciousness. The cinematography feels painterly. And yeah, these seemingly isolated moments of genius make the film extraordinary. There are scenes where the creature learns language, where he watches people in the shadows and acts as a benefactor. There's an innocence to him right off the bat that is challenged, if you will, by the world that we live in. He's born, or in his earlier days, he's afraid of light. That's in a sense, somewhat of a symbol, if you will, of his being at odds with existence, with his existence.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
What makes someone either good or bad? What is the determining factor as to whether someone is a positive influence or a negative influence? If someone, there's some people that have RBF, resting B word face, and they get negative connotations put upon them just by virtue of how they look, how they present. I think this film sort of makes you think about something like that, because the creature is never the one to be violent first. The creature has violence, in a sense, thrust upon him by virtue of either how he looks or to what extent he's either not living up to other people's preconceived notions of what he should be, or disappointing, or maybe on a visceral level, eliciting rather negative feelings by virtue of things that are ephemeral, things that are, well, not ephemeral, but like things that are superficial. The way he looks, the only character that, in a sense, is able to look past superficialities are a blind man and an interesting woman in the character of Elizabeth. So, I mean, it raised an interesting question of what makes one, in a sense, quote unquote, bad. Peter Dinklage's character in Game of Thrones is a good example. This is someone that was treated rather horribly for most of his life by family, and was always seen by his father, Tywin. That's Charles Dance, who's in this film as well. Maybe that's what Guillermo del Toro was going for in casting Charles Dance as Leopold Frankenstein, Victor's father. A different character than is present in the book, because in the book he's more so, kind of like plain vanilla type of father, whereas here he's, in a sense, the root of a lot of Victor's pain, which he then transfers onto the creature. So it's an interesting question of cycles of trauma, and how sometimes people end up being none too dissimilar to the people that are the source of their pain. Hurt people. But yeah, interesting question of what makes one good or bad. If you have a certain type of look about you, profiling, being typecast, there's certain assumptions that are just made about individuals based off of how they look. And sometimes, those things aren't necessarily wrong, but they are always a limiter that's placed on an individual. And That's something that the creature definitely has to grapple with in the book, but more so illustrated because of how, more so illustrated in this adaptation because of how adept Guillermo del Toro is at humanizing monsters. And in a Paradise Lost-esque, if you will, framing, which Paradise Lost was also, instrumental in Mary Shelley's conceptualization of Frankenstein, the original novel. But in a Paradise Lost-esque sort of vein of storytelling, there is a sense in which perhaps one might come to question who really is the monster. There's very little people can do about things that are congenital. And on some level, I think that's why I've always, in a sense, felt that, once we reach a certain level of abundance, it will be a real question about who we are as a species, what we do. We're not just the weakest amongst us, but the so-called worst amongst us. So, quick facts about the film. It was directed by Guillermo del Toro, screenplay by Guillermo del Toro based on Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It's Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. Stars Oscar Isaac, Jacob Elordi, Mia Goth, Christoph Waltz, Charles Dance. Cinematography by Dan Lauston. Right, so even good films bleed, and this isn't necessarily like a perfect outing. I mean, you could make the case for it being visually stunning, which I've said, and that, entails everything from its cinematography to its costume to its production design. But yeah, there's just some stuff with like pacing, especially towards the middle. It starts to drag. There are also stretches where the narrative becomes a bit heavy-handed, and it seems as though it could have been handled more elegantly or more briskly, as opposed to dragging. I'm repeating myself, but you get the point. Right, so the pacing drags towards the middle. There are characters with unclear motivations. Elizabeth, in particular, one moment she's all over Victor, seemingly all over Victor. The other, she's I suppose it was pretty much clear throughout that she had like a disdain for him, but in some parts it softens, and I don't know, maybe she was searching for, maybe there was an innocence about him that she was drawn to that manifested in the creature being a creation of his. It really does feel like the film is like a collage of brilliant ideas, a mosaic that doesn't quite mesh as well as perhaps intended, but like the pieces are beautiful nonetheless. Right, so my verdict would be that Del Toro's Frankenstein is ambitious but flawed, a masterpiece in pieces, but it's worth your time, especially if you enjoy Gothic storytelling, philosophical cinema, and films that perhaps leave you thinking long about some of the themes it raises after the credits have rolled. It earns a thumbs up, and yeah, I'm Alfa Mo. This has been Third Floor 2 Kobo's Why You Should Watch, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.